Okay. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. This webinar is kind of covering off the new features that have come in 1.16, which was released earlier this week. So what we'll have a look at is some of the key changes. So we'll look at the project settings, talk about why we made some changes to the project settings, where they are, what you can do with them. We'll have a look at saving the Squirrel file when publishing. We'll have a look at two new connectors that we've introduced in 1.16, which is the native Google Sheets connector and the Excel Online connector. And then we'll have a quick talk about the progressive web applications, or PWAs, that we're rolling out and starting off in this release of Squirrel as well. So project settings. Previously in Squirrel, we've had canvas settings where you selected the main canvas of your application. You can change certain things. You had export properties when you went to try and export to the cloud or to local, where you could change some other settings. And there was other properties that are in various different locations, and sometimes it wasn't quite clear where to make some changes. We had an issue as well with the some properties like project name that existed in both canvas properties and export properties, and sometimes the changes you made were persisting and saving in the Squirrel file, and other times they weren't, and there was confusion amongst users as to where to set what property for it to be consistent within the application. So what we've done now is we've simplified that, brought all those properties and all those settings together into one location, and we can then go and access those and make that make the changes, and all those changes now persist within the Squirrel project file. So this is what the new modal looks like. We'll have a quick look at that in action in a moment, but basically all the properties have been pulled together. So snippets of what the export looked like, some of the runtime performance and canvas location has all been brought into one location as well. So you can see things like export scaling, runtime performance, password protection. If I wanted to expire a project, for example, that's all now in those project settings. PWA settings are in there as well, because those changes and those settings are stored in the Squirrel file, but we'll cover more of that in a minute. And also we've now got that save Squirrel file on publish option as well. So what that save Squirrel is, we'll have a look at that next. It gives you the option to save a copy of the actual Squirrel file. So when you press the publish button to publish it to the cloud, it takes it publishes up all the settings and everything for the application to view, so you can view it in the cloud. But what it does now, it also saves a copy of that Squirrel file. So later on, if you wanted to download a copy of the Squirrel file for a published project, say you've lost it, for example, you've made some changes and you want to go back to what that published version was, you can be able to download that out of the Squirrel cloud now. So Donald did a really good post on the community and summarized it really well. So Squirrel designers no longer have to keep track of which version of their Squirrel files were used to publish which version of their cloud product, and that's exactly why we introduced this capability. It's accessed from either the project manager or the version manager, which we'll have a look at in a second, and you'll see a new download button for projects that have got the Squirrel file attached to them. So let's jump in and have a look at those then. So in my Squirrel application, Mel, make sure I'm sharing the right screen. Can you see that all right?
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, perfect. So previously in Squirrel, you clicked on a canvas and we had loads of properties on the side here, or when you went to publish, you had a number of properties. That is now been cleaned up and reduced down, so there's not a lot of properties in there. And similarly with the canvas, the properties here now are to do with the canvas, not to do with the project as a whole. To access the project settings, you go to File, Project Settings, it opens up that modal, and you've got access to all this information as well. Performance, ability to do this, the performance tuning. We've put in store a copy of your Squirrel file in the cloud there. It's off by default because lots of companies and lots of people who are using Squirrel don't necessarily want to store the Squirrel file in the cloud, because it might have certain confidential information. Spreadsheet or calculations and algorithms are not really wanting to share. When we publish a project to the cloud for publishing for viewing, it obfuscates it, encrypts it, and passes it up to the cloud, so we can't reverse engineer it. So the saving the Squirrel file stores your Squirrel file up there. So it's an option you have to opt into rather than it being on by default. But once you've ticked that box, if I then go and publish the project, if I just do a very quick one, hello project, publish that to the cloud. when I go to my project manager, so I've got my Hello application here, you can see I've now got that little download icon. If I click on that, it will trigger the Squirrel file to download, and where do you want to save it? So it's a hello.squirrel, gets downloaded, and you can also look through for different projects that might have it as well. So looking at the Squirrel Karaoke application here, I've got the download. But if I also go to my version manager, so manage versions, you can see the first version I published, I forgot to tick the box. The second version, I have got it, but it'll keep a track of for each of your versions that you publish over the top of your project. It'll have that, so you can download those Squirrel files, so you don't have to worry about losing which Squirrel file was used for which published project. Okay. So moving on then from those settings, we've got the new connectors, so the Google and Excel connectors. We've had Google and Excel connectors in the Squirrel for quite a while now, but they were cumbersome to use and a little bit slow sometimes in using them. You had to, in Google and in Excel, create a publicly available share link, copy that link into Squirrel, and then when you're consuming that, Squirrel had to then go and query those, request that information back, convert it into the right format, and then insert it into the spreadsheet. It was a little bit cumbersome, slow sometimes, depending on how fast that conversion went. And there's a downside was that you had to make those Squirrel files, so the Excel and Google files, publicly shared as well, which some people didn't want to do. So what we've done is we've gone back to the drawing board and we've created some new connectors, which are using authentication against the Google Drive and the Excel OneDrive platforms using OAuth. What this allows us to do, it allows us to be an authenticated request against those platforms to retrieve the data. So we don't need a publicly sharing link. You create your account, you sign up for that, you tell us which sheet you want to use, and then we have permission to go and retrieve data out of that sheet. So we can read that out without the public share links, which we'll see in a moment. But because we're an authenticated link, so the Google Drive and the OneDrive platform know who we are, they know that you've given us permission to those sheets, we now have the ability to natively write back to those sheets as well. So no need to use a third-party platform such as Zapier to do that write back. And with the Excel APIs that we've used as well, it allows us to not only just query the sheet, but if you use the tables capability within Excel, we can now read and write tables as well. So not just the sheets, we can read them to the semantic tables that are built into Excel as well. So I've got a couple of demos for the new connectors. Let's have a look at a simple read example. So I've got a project here. The project has got no data in it, it's completely empty. I've got a couple of views, I've got a chart view and I've got an add-on view with this list. So what I want to do is I want to retrieve data from, let's use Google. So not functions, connections, add a new connection. So I want to connect to Google Sheets. I've already got my connection set up, but what you would do if you were first coming into here, you just click on link to new account. It will then go through the authentication flow that people are familiar with to sign up. Basically say, I give Squirrel permission to view these spreadsheets, and you have to select spreadsheets. So for example, with Google Drive, what we have to do is select the sheet, select the document, and then this pops up the Google Drive browser. Select the sheet that I want. It's now queried that. So what tabs have I got within this worksheet? I've got one tab called Report 1. And where do I want to put that data? Let me put that into this yellow block here. So select a range in the existing sheet. And let's find where that yellow block finishes. Oh, it's quite large. That will do. There we go. Confirm that. Now if I go into debug, you can see its data's come into that now from my Google Sheet. And I can now navigate through and use my project to look at the data. So this is using the authenticated OAuth connection to the Google Sheet, retrieving that data and bringing that back in straight away. So that is reading it. So if I have a look now at writing it, so the Google Write Back, very, very simple demo. Let me just snap this to the left and I'll snap the Google Sheet to the right. So this is the Google Sheet that we were querying before. And what I want to do now is to demonstrate writing and inserting into that. So what I'll do is have a quick look here. I've got just some simple input fields, put some text in, and when I click on the button here to submit it, it's going to toggle that from a 0 to a 1. So I'm going to use that to trigger my write back. There we go. So if I add a Google write back connector, select my Google account I want to use, select the document I want, and what worksheet do I want to insert into. So I want to insert into report 1. So you can see report 1 down the bottom. We've got 3 different options. Insert, which is obvious, it's just inserting a new row. We've got update, so I can update a row where column A equals a particular value or doesn't equal a particular value, and we can do that. Updates only insert updates one row, so it'll find the first row that matches that criteria. We've also got upsert. What upsert does is it tries to find a row in the table. If it can't find a row, if it does find the row, it'll update it. If it can't find the row, it will then insert it. So you have the option of either update or insert. We'll just do a simple insert for now. Now I'm going to insert this data here, which is from those inputs, and put that into the spreadsheet on cell change. So when G1 changes, and we've got the option here to pass in some feedback, so we can say if it's inserting, if it failed, how many rows it inserted, how many rows it updated. So you can use that to track the write back capabilities. So if I go into here now, put some information in, click on the button, and then we should see over here straight away it's now inserted into my spreadsheet. I used the Google write back capability because Google updates immediately. If I did it with Excel, which it does do exactly the same with Excel, you either have to sit around for half an hour for Excel to realize it needs to refresh the view, or you have to manually refresh. But from a demo point of view, the Google write back works really well.
Rich, just before you move on, if you were to have hit the button to insert that again, you would have seen an identical row get inserted below that one, wouldn't you? So
Correct.
I don't know if it's worth pointing out the onus is on you to find a way. If you're going to use it as like use a Google Sheet as like a mini database for your application, effectively, the onus is on you to the developer or designer of the app to work out a way to enforce uniqueness.
Yeah.
So
inserting is nice and straightforward. We can insert multiple rows of data. So if we had lots of data rows, we could insert blocks of data into the sheets. The reason why we've limited to updates to 1 is because the Google Sheet and Excel, they're not databases. They don't have the concept of primary keys. They don't have the concept of unique values. So the risk is you could very easily have an update, get your criteria slightly wrong, and then just update and trash your whole spreadsheet. So we wanted to keep the destructive actions, so updating and upserting, which we perceived as being potentially destructive, we've limited those. As we move forward and we start seeing how people use these connectors, we could look to remove that. It's not a limitation on the Google or the Excel side of things. It's a limitation we've enforced just to prevent something from accidentally breaking it. It's not designed to be a database. It's designed to be something where you can just insert as a quick information. We do have access to database connectivity through things like Infoburst, for example, but from a simple updating a record, so say for example you wanted to select a row for a user and then change their details, just one row for example, is nice and straightforward and it makes sense that way. But yeah, on insert, if you do need uniqueness, it'll be on you to ensure and enforce uniqueness. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you.
Okay, so that is the 2 new connectors, and then moving on to the progressive web applications. So progressive web applications, or PWAs, are a type of web application, so a type of website or Squirrel produces web applications that provides a native app-like experience. It doesn't make everything native. It doesn't make it look exactly like it does in Android, but it gives you the ability to install the application on devices such as Windows, Mac, iOS, and Android devices, and it has the option to feel native. The benefit is that with it installed, you don't need to go to a URL. Someone can just click on an icon on their phone, for example, or iPad, and get back into the application. It gives you the ability to install it on all these devices. So on Chrome, it looks like this. There's a little download button in the top right corner, and then it'll install it with an icon. This is what it looks like on Edge. It's subtly different. All the browsers have kind of done their own flavor on how things should look. So you've got, this is what it looks like on Chrome. This is what it looks like on Edge. This is what it looks like on iOS, which I'll show you in a minute. This is what it looks like on Android. But the idea being is, as a PWA, it gives you the ability to have that installed on your devices and have it accessible from those devices as well. So leveraging caching, so with the PWA, it gives you the ability to cache the Squirrel application. So what that means is once that's been installed, it is possible to use that application without internet connectivity. Obviously, if you are connecting to a live Google Sheet, for example, or to a database, you'll need to have the internet connectivity to get that data in. But if you've got an embedded application, which is just value drivers or what if scenario analysis and those sorts of things, where it's all embedded within the Squirrel application, then it will work without internet connectivity. So the scale and scope of PWAs is growing all the time. We started to work on PWAs probably about 18 months, 2 years ago, and since then it's been gradually getting more and more evolved in terms of its capabilities, what it offers, and what you can do with PWAs. Even since we launched, or we completed the development of this part of 1.16 in probably October, November last year, and since then things have moved on, things have evolved, so it's constantly a moving beast in terms of what you can do with PWAs. So for the moment, we've rolled out just what we think is kind of like the bare essentials for the release, which is the ability to install the application, provide icons, which we'll show you in a minute, and have that installed on devices. But as the capability improves for PWAs, and as we start seeing how people are using PWAs, we can then look to tap into some of those more native application capabilities as well. There's so much more we could do with it, but we just wanted to kind of lift the lid on it and scratch it as well. Just to highlight the fact that the PWA landscape is still changing. Since we baselined the code for 1.16, there's been a number of tweaks, improvements, as Apple would call it, where we've noticed some issues with PWAs on Safari, so both on Mac and also on iOS, where things like icons, some icons are missing, some CSS and those sorts of things. So we're still looking at that. The benefit for how we've implemented the PWAs is lots of those changes we can do without needing to push out new versions of Squirrel. So as we keep an eye on what browsers and operating systems are doing to support new capabilities for PWA, we'll have the ability to add more functionality into the PWAs without having to deploy Squirrel updates all the time as well, which is quite nice. So let's have a quick look at some PWAs then. So if I have a look here, so we've got an example conversion calculator that one of the guys in the team created. Nothing very complicated, but the idea is you can convert from centimeters to feet, or temperature, for example. You can say, well, what 30 degrees C is 86 degrees Fahrenheit. Just nice and simple. And this will be a great example from PWA that it doesn't do any live connectivity. There's no database connectivity. Everything it needs to calculate this is all embedded within the application. So as a PWA, this would be 100% workable offline. But it just gives you the ability to do those sorts of conversions. We're also working on one for calculating. So when we come across to the States for the IBIS conference, we always fall foul of not knowing how much to tip in locations and places. And so we're creating a tip calculator where you can put in the certain amount for the bill and then put in a percentage, and just nice simple calculation to tell you how much the tip is. And if you're splitting it amongst 3 or 4 people, how much every person's got to put in. So we're building a PWA for that as well. So how would I publish this as a PWA? So as I mentioned before, it's in our project settings. Go down to PWA settings, and I've got the option of turning it on. So as soon as I turn it on, that will enable some of the capabilities for the PWA. First thing it's going to ask me for, what is my name? So converter. It's about wrong. That'll do. Got a short name as well. So the difference between these is this is where there's inconsistency in how browsers and operating systems have implemented it. if I call this converter and call this convert, for example, if I installed it on my desktop machine through Chrome, the application will be called converter. If I install it on iOS or so iPhones, iPads, or even on Macs, it uses the short name. So they've got two fields for the same thing, which is two things for the name. So these things are changing as we go forward, but we've got both of them in here so we can support both desktop, Android, and iOS. And the other requirements are some colors. So what do you want the colors to be? So this is the background color. So what's the default color waiting for the application to load? So when you go onto the phone, what do you want your background color to be? And the theme color is what do you want the bar across the top? What color do you want that to be? And obviously we need an icon. So if I select my icon, choose my converter icon, and what we can do here is there's about 6 or 7 different icon sizes that you need for all the various different permutations of PWA, so desktop, for iPad, for Android, for high resolution screens, for low resolution screens. We handle all that for you behind the scenes. All you have to do is select an image, and it gives you these different previews of what they look like. So what they'll look like on round for Edge and Safari, rounded square corners for iOS, and some different versions for different operating systems and browsers as well. But what we've also got is we've also got crop capability, so you can choose to zoom in if you only wanted a part of your icon, for example, so you could handle all that and then rejig it around. So if you've got a larger image and you just wanted to zoom in on a certain section, you can do that, and then it will just use that as your icon. So once you've got that done, click on OK, and then all you have to do is just publish it up to the cloud. And once that's been published to the cloud, it will then be available as a PWA. So if I launch this now, it doesn't look different, apart from you can see in the top corner here, I've got a little download icon. We are working on a way to kind of draw your eye to the fact that it's a PWA, to educate people that something's installable. The challenge we have is that there's no consistent standard way of doing that at the moment. What is available on Chrome isn't available on Edge and isn't available on iOS, for example. So we're trying to find a way to educate people to know that that installer button's there. But once you do click on install, it pops up. It's called Converter. I've got my square icon. Install that. And that now has installed it on my machine. So you can see here, that has installed it. Ooh, make it a bit smaller, there we go, so we can see it. That's installed it on my machine, and it's the full interactivity. It looks and feels like an application. If I click on start, you can see at the bottom, it's installed it as an application there. And if I went to add remove programs, it shows it in add remove program as an application as well. We have got it installed on iOS as well, but rather than try to get it so I could do it live demo, but it wasn't working well. So here's one I prepared earlier. So I've got a video of my phone. This is the URL to where the application is. So to deploy the application at the moment, you have to go to the URL where the project is. On iOS, you click on the share button, you scroll down, click on add to home screen. You've got my icon, got my convert, the short name you can see here. Click on add, and that's now put it on my desktop. And when I launch it, it opens it up in the browser. So the blue bar is that color I chose for when in Squirrel. The option was what color do we want the background settings for here. I moved that around, so the loading screen was grey and my bar was blue because my project is all blue. So that then it makes that top bar blue, so it kind of fits in with the aesthetics of your application. But you go through, and that then creates it. So if I go back to the video here, before, there we go. Ignore the disembodied finger, but that then it's an application icon. Try and get rid of that finger. There we go. It's on your device. It looks like an application, and when you launch it, it launches it as it feels like an application as well. So that's what the PWA side of things are as well. I think that's it, Mel, unless I've missed anything off that you can think of.
No, I think that covers it for what's new in 116. We had Herb did ask a question that you could cover off for us, probably, Rich, around the PWA stuff. So, in terms of service workers, and you're more au fait with this than me, Herb's asked if service workers will be added in the future. Are we using service workers already for the caching offline cache stuff, or is
Yes.
it new to? Okay.
Yes, we are. Yeah. So for the caching, there's various different caching strategies that we've got with our service workers. We've got a service worker just for the caching. It displays what's on the web first. It then checks to see if there's any updates. So it's web first, offline second. So then it always gets the latest version. But then the next time, if you're offline, it'll then serve that up. The service workers is kind of like the glue and the brains behind PWAs, and that's what gives you lots of capabilities. There's lots more complex things you can do, like API call caching and those sorts of things, and the service workers will provide access to that. But as I said, we're just doing the bare essentials for the moment, kind of like to try and find if there are any sorts of teething problems. Like we saw, so 2 weeks ago we tested it, it was all great, it was all working, and then this week we tested it and we realized that there's been an update on iOS and some of the icons aren't appearing. So we need to kind of get on top of that and work out how we can close the loop on that. Once we've got that sorted out, these little niggles that aren't working, then we'll start looking at how people are using it. There's so much you can do with PWAs. PWAs gives you access to things like the device camera, the accelerometer, in-app purchases, and all those
notifications, things like that.
Notifications and loads of things like that. So what we want to do is we want to see get it so that we're happy that it's all working great, which is there. See how people want to use it, and then we'll look to add capabilities and moving us in that direction. But yeah, the service worker is kind of like the brain or the glue that moves us in that direction.
Perfect. Thank you. Brill. Yeah, I think that's it. That's a good run through. Thank you, Rich.
No worries. So that should now be available for everyone. Should have all got prompted to download that. Any problems with that, then just reach out. But it'd be good to hear and see on the community what you've been doing with all the new cool stuff. Josh has already put something on on LinkedIn about the Google Sheet, so it's great to see what other people come up with as well.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I've just seen your question come in around two people using or doing updates to Google Sheets at the same time. That sort of a little bit comes back to the point I was raising earlier in terms of at the moment, if you've got two people trying to update the same record at the same time, it's going to be whichever one hits it last, I guess, which is the one that persists.
It all depends on what you're updating. So it's not a database, so it doesn't have indexes. You want to get into the more technical side of things. So what it has to do is it has to do an update in two queries. The first query is let me search for all the rows in the spreadsheet, and what is the row number for the first row that matches my criteria in my where clause. It'll then go, that's row number 55, and then it will immediately execute a update row number 55 and set these new values. If somebody, which is why we haven't got delete in our connectors, because if somebody deleted that in between, your row 55 would now be 54 and you'd be deleting the wrong row. So the deleting isn't in there for that very reason. The updating happens very quickly. So the first query gets me the row number, the second query, which is instantaneously afterwards. But if you are using it, someone's doing it at the same time, then there is the risk of that. So you just need to kind of be mindful about how you identify a unique row, for example. If you're updating the primary key, then that will potentially cause a problem if two people try to update at the same time. If you're not updating the primary key, it doesn't lock the table. So if you've got two separate rows that have different criteria, then that would work fine.
And if you're just inserting, got multiple people doing inserts, and they're just going to go into
we just execute and say stick it on the bottom.
Yeah, awesome. Well, I hope that answers your question, Abe. Excellent. That's it then. No more questions in. Thank you very much. Thanks, Rich. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you all.
Cheers all. Bye-bye.
Bye.